We are to continue now with the next session, who is going to be moderated by Gregorius Fontas. Gregorius is already here with us, so I give you the floor, Gregorius, so that you can present all the speakers of this session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Francis. Thank you, Glenn, for sharing the excellent session before. Welcome again here. This is Greg. This is Greg Fundas. I am a lecturer in the Transport Research Institute of Edinburgh Napier University. I'm working in areas of traffic safety and travel behavior, so I believe that the discussion that we will have in this session will be exciting and very interesting. At least it's very interesting for me as far as I have seen from the abstracts and the work that will be presented today. I don't want to spend a lot of minutes with introductions, just to mention as an initial statement that today we will be focusing on the impact on this session here, the session 2. We will be focusing on the impact of COVID-19 of travel demand, and particularly on different aspects, quite diverse aspects of travel demand, ranging from residential relocation to public health outcomes on the use of public transport and commuting. So I guess we will have a quite interesting intellectual exchange. I am for those that you have just joined the session, just to remind you that we will have a Q&A session and a question and answer session in the end. So please, if you have any questions in the meanwhile, please type them only in written format in the chat box. And with the help of Francis and the great team in IT, I will receive the questions in the end, and we will have a very nice Q&A session. So I will not spend more time on the introductory stuff. I will quickly go to our first presenter, who is Ajay Saxena from Transport Research Institute at Edinburgh Napier University. Well, Ajay is quite familiar to me. We have worked together over the last couple of years. However, Ajay Saxena right now is a graduate consultant at Sistra. He has recently completed his MSc in Transport Planning and Engineering with distinction from the Edinburgh Napier University. He has been involved as an architect for 9 years on urban rail projects in India, Southeast Asia, and Middle East. The topic of the presentation of Ajay is residential relocation after COVID-19. Ajay, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. I still don't get the option to share my screen. Am I audible?
Yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. We can see the first slide of your presentation. Thank you.
Right. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and thank you, Greg, for the nice introduction. Transport Research Institute at Edinburgh Napier University is studying the long and short-term impact of COVID-19. I am Ajay Saxena, and I will be sharing our findings of COVID-19's impact on residential relocations. Choice of residence. If we look at how people choose the place they reside at, the conventional decision-making factors are proximity to their place of work, proximity to commercial, recreational, essential services, and transport options, affordability, that applies to both housing and transport costs, and of course, safety. We can see that the decision is based on a balance between accessibility and affordability. Motivation for research. Post-COVID-19, the mode of accessibility has significantly shifted to digital, and that may start to influence the residential location choice among individuals. Intention to relocate and the choice of type of area, that is urban or non-urban, are analyzed in this study. Data collection. We conducted an online survey offered to Scottish residents in February 2021 and collected 994 responses. Quota constraints for age, gender, and household income were enforced to get a sample that is representative of the Scottish population. The questionnaire focused on perceptions of importance, fear, satisfaction, danger, transmission risk of COVID-19, travel behavior before, during lockdowns, and future intentions, lifestyle changes during lockdowns and expectations for the future, residential location choices, trust on sources of information and advice related to COVID-19, Socio-demographic characteristics. The key characteristics of the sample are hyperlinked here, which may be referred separately. Now, what we looked at. We aimed to identify the characteristics of people intending to relocate at different timelines, that is within 5 years, after 5 years, or never, and to different area types, that is urban or non-urban. We asked if respondents intend to relocate after COVID-19, and a total of 40% responded in the affirmative, with 27.5% intending to relocate within 5 years and 13% after 5 years. And this is the first dependent variable. Among these 40%, people were asked if they intend to relocate within their local area, outside their local area within Scotland, or outside Scotland. Their present and desired location to relocate were also asked. Those intending to relocate in Scotland within or outside their local area were assigned urban and non-urban status for their present and desired locations to arrive at 4 relocation types: from non-urban to non-urban, from non-urban to urban, from urban to non-urban, and from urban to urban. Choice of area type of these two cohorts, that is urban residents and non-urban residents, form the second dependent variable. Methodology and definitions. Since the outcomes relocate in near future and relocate in distant future are expected to share unobserved effects, a nested model framework is used to model intention to relocate. For choice of area type, a random parameter binary model is used. The models are estimated separately for respondents residing in urban and non-urban locations. Coming to quick definitions now. The councils of Aberdeen City, Dundee City, Edinburgh City, and Glasgow City have population higher than 125,000. And that is the threshold for large urban areas defined by Scottish government. Hence, these 4 councils were assigned urban status. Remaining 28 councils of Scotland are assigned non-urban status. The 4 relocation types identified in the previous slide are accordingly worked out to model choice of area type. Coming to the model estimation results, starting with intention to relocate. The direction of effect of a variable is indicated by arrows. Green arrow indicates increased likelihood of relocating, and red arrow mean increased likelihood of non-relocating. The table shows the attributes that influence the relocation intention at branch level. So the decision to relocate or not is based on the following. Individuals who find monthly bills affordable, who did not contract COVID, and who reported higher compliance of travel regulations during COVID-19 have increased likelihood of not relocating. Individuals who were slightly satisfied or slightly dissatisfied with life before the pandemic have increased likelihood of relocating. Now looking at those intending to relocate in near future or within 5 years, the findings are those aged 18 to 34 qualified as a postgraduate with no home ownership have higher likelihood of relocating in near future. Additionally, they feel that the pandemic completely changed their lives. The preferences and reasons of relocation are they want a different lifestyle, a smaller or cheaper property, proximity to good services and amenities, a non-urban location, and have a change in employment situation or family circumstances. On the other hand, households with children aged 5 to 18 are found to have higher likelihood of not relocating in near future. Those intending to relocate to the seaside are also not in a hurry to relocate. The next table tells us about those intending to relocate in distant future or after 5 years. Age group 18 to 34, annual household income of 50 to 60,000, high car ownership are found to be associated with higher likelihood of relocating in distant future. Those relocating with those relocating want a smaller or cheaper property, proximity to good transport, proximity to good services and amenities, and a non-urban location. High pre-pandemic use of private vehicle is associated with higher likelihood of not relocating in distant future. Now the next table tells us about the attributes of those not choosing to relocate at all. People aged 55 and above, low household income, those who consider train as high risk mode and walking as low risk mode for COVID transmission, and those who consider family life to be significant have higher likelihood of never relocating. Those who had high trust in their employer's communication on COVID-19 related information and advice have higher likelihood of relocating at some point in time. Coming to the second question, choice of area type, we first present the findings of non-urban dwellers. In addition to the legend here, arrows marked with RP indicate that the variable is found significant as a random parameter. Green arrow indicate likelihood of moving to urban location, and red arrow to non-urban location. Non-urban dwellers planning a move to urban location earn 30 to 40,000 annually, consider bus as high-risk mode for COVID transmission, have a relocation distance of 80 to 100 km, want better proximity to employment and to good transport options. The variable proximity to good transport is found significant as a random parameter. Females and those who do not prefer attending events and festivals plan to relocate from non-urban to non-urban location within a relocation distance of 20 km. People planning these relocations also expect reduced future dependence on public transport because they find it crowded. This last variable is also found significant as a random parameter. The next table shows the relocation preferences of urban dwellers. Again, green arrow means move to urban, red arrow to non-urban. Urban residents intending to move to another urban location are aged 18 to 24, working outside home or unemployed, living on rent, and want larger property. Urban residents planning a move to non-urban location, hold a bachelor's degree, earn over 50,000 or under 10,000 per year, are relocating between 40 to 60 km and want a different lifestyle in a nicer area. Key findings. A range of socio-demographic and psychological factors are found to affect intentions to relocate and the choice of area type for relocation. Female non-urban dwellers and those preferring to relocate close to their current place within 20 kilometers intend to relocate to another non-urban region. Non-urban dwellers expecting to use less public transport in future due to crowdedness are more likely to relocate to another non-urban area. This highlights the lost user confidence in public transport due to the pandemic. High-income earning urban dwellers are willing to relocate to nicer non-urban areas 40 to 60 kilometers away. A February 2021 survey in the US looking at relocations also found urban to non-urban relocations associated with young population and a relocation distance of 60 miles or 48 kilometers. Urban dwellers without access to work from home want to relocate to an urban area for larger property. This highlights how spatial requirements expected from place of residence have changed given activities like recreation, education, etc. are now performed at home at a higher rate. Middle-income non-urban dwellers wish to relocate to urban destinations for proximity to better transport and to place of work. Overall, these findings highlight structural changes in post-pandemic commuting distances, gentrification or suburban expansion around present urban centers, and also explain the sudden increase of demand for larger rural housing noted amidst the pandemic. Factors directly or indirectly specific to COVID-19 are people who contracted COVID-19, whose lives completely changed due to COVID-19, have low self-reported compliance of lockdown restrictions, are more likely to relocate. Higher trust in employers' communication regarding COVID-19 facilitates intention to relocate. In a study, McKinsey and Company found that organizations that conveyed detailed remote relevant policies during COVID-19 saw greater increase in employee well-being. Conclusion. Policy implications. We recommend that policies aimed to ensure resilient growth of both urban and non-urban areas be enacted to handle consequent redistribution of demand for services and infrastructure like housing, healthcare, transport, education. Policies aimed at restoring confidence to public transport may be crucial for demand management and for achieving net zero transportation targets. Limitations and future research. The study is based on preferences from early 2021 when Scotland was in its second lockdown. The outlook then towards return to normalcy may not have been as positive as now, and perceptions may have evolved with the changing outlook towards COVID-19. Future research may analyze residential relocations using data in light of the latest stages of the pandemic. That's all from me. Thank you very much for your attention and patience.
Thank you, Ajay. Thank you very much. I'm pretty sure that everybody thanks you also in a virtual world. Thank you very much for keeping the presentation on time, which is greatly appreciated. We will have a chance to discuss further the findings of your research in the end in the Q&A session. Now, thank you again. I will be moving forward with the second presenter of the session, who is Fidelma Ibili. Fidelma is probably Okay, excellent. I can see the screen of Fidelma. Excellent. So a few words for Fidelma. Fidelma hails from the Delta State in Nigeria, a graduate of CEC, a graduate of civil engineering from Ambrose Ali University, and she holds an immense degree in transportation from the Federal University of Technology in Akure, and currently pursuing her PhD in road and transportation engineering. So her professional interests focus on sustainable urban transport infrastructure, and her current projects include geospatial modeling of traffic nodes and its exposure along the road corridors in Kumasi. In addition, she's a member of the International Association of Engineers, graduate member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers, and a Health, Safety and Environment Committee. So Fidelma will present the topic related to the impact of COVID-19 on commercial drivers and public transport in Freetown, Sierra Leone. Of course, such a long discussion has been over the last couple of years, actually, after the emergence of COVID on public transport. So we're all looking forward to your presentation. Thank you very much, Fidelma. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slide?
Yes, we can see your slide. Yes, you are ready to go.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. So this research is on impact of COVID-19 on commercial drivers and public transport in Freetown, Sierra Leone. So the authors are Simeon Stevenson Toure, Fidelma Ibili, Augustus Donko. And this is the outline of the presentation. And in the inception of COVID-19 in 2019, which struck the world globally, and it came alongside with some detriments like impeding travel behavior and some major activities. And with this in view, the government put into place some restrictions in order to curb the spread of this virus. Sierra Leone and country was also part of the countries which were hit by this pandemic, and they recorded their first case in March 31st, 2020. Also, for stopping the spread of this virus, the government of Sierra Leone also put in place some restrictions, which are a reduction of number of passengers, reduction of working hours, social distancing, among others. So looking at these restrictions that were put in place, it came alongside with some disadvantages like a reduction of unemployment and social and religious economic activities in the country, and also it affected the transportation system. Therefore, this study was looking into to investigate the impact of this COVID-19 on urban mobility, and also looking at the economic well-being of commercial drivers in Sierra Leone. And from this study, we're able to provide, in order to provide realistic recommendations that can enhance the country's transportation system, as well as improve the livelihood of commercial drivers during such emergencies. Freetown was selected for this study in Sierra Leone. It's a major town in Sierra Leone. It has a higher number of population and increase of vehicular ownership. Also, including it has lots of vehicular terminals, and it's the transportation utilization there. It's very significant, and it has a long known of history of epidemic, just like when Ebola struck. Freetown was also among such towns which were also affected. In view of this, this town was selected for this study. For us to achieve our aim, we adopted this methodology. First, we went through an intensive literature review and went about to factor in our sample size and design a questionnaire survey. First, we designed the survey and then we tested it using like a pilot study. And from this, we gathered 70 respondents who started off this study. We used them to able to understand our sample design, and from there we were able to make modification before we went further for our main survey. In all, we surveyed 21 terminals in the town, and out of our target of 270 samples, we realized a compliance of 250, which is above 93% compliance from the respondents. Upon our data collection, we carried out a statistical analysis of descriptive and inferential analysis on our data. It is well to know that our survey was carried out through phone call since there were a partial lockdown in the town. So this was the best method we were able to employ at that time. From analysis gathered, we discovered that a higher proportion of the respondents were male, which was 94%, and then also a higher percentage of the respondents was a driver of 60%, and the age gap of the respondents were between the ages of 18 to 45 age of respondents which we interviewed. Questions like a driving experience and vehicular ownership were also asked to the respondents, and a higher proportion of the respondents had above 10 years of driving experience. Also, we looked at the available mode share of the country, of the town, in terms of the modal split in the town. And before COVID-19, Poda was the predominant mode of transport which was used. But during COVID, we realized that there was a decline in this mode share, in this mode of transportation, which Okada had a higher proportion. Now, during COVID, this could be due to the fact that commuters were kind of scared of not able to contact the disease. So because of the social distance, they preferred using Okada, whereby to just be them and the driver, and less interaction with people. Looking at the effects of the pandemic on the commercial transport. So questions like availability of transport modes, the terminal waiting time, social distance, and congestion level, transport fare were asked to the respondents. And interestingly, 3 major factors were discovered, which was a terminal waiting time, social distance, and transport fare increased from before COVID and then during COVID. Also, the terminal waiting time for commuters to be able to board the vehicle to their destination also increased from our survey. We also went further to look at the effects of this pandemic on the economic status of the drivers mostly, and the commuters. So we employed a recursive test. What this test does, that it helps us to compare the effect of the sample before and after, or before and during. So from our analysis from the mean RAG values, we discovered that the drivers' daily turnover before COVID reduced during COVID. So the drivers made less during COVID. This affected them drastically. Also, another major factor, which was the transportation fare, the commuters responded highly that the transportation fare increased greatly. Looking at from our mean value scores, we discovered that the transportation fare increased. But yet, even with this increment in transportation, the drivers could not still meet up their daily targets. Another factor also was the increase in terminal waiting time because of less commuters and restrictions that were put in place. It took a longer time for drivers to pick up from the terminal to destination, and also for commuters to get to their various destinations. Another interesting factor we found that was during COVID was that traffic congestion reduced. So this was like an advantage on the commercial transport system in the country. Conclusion from our analysis, we found out that cost of transportation increased, and then drivers didn't make up their usual targets during COVID, and also above 76% reduction in traffic congestion was discovered during our survey. And there was this increase in the shift regular mode of transportation, which was Poda was normally the main mode of transport in the town, but during COVID, this reduced, and then a motorbike became the predominant mode of transportation. And due to the increment of transportation fees and all that, this also affected the economical growth of the country by basic amenities and other social basic essentials increased drastically during the pandemic. From our survey, we thereby make some recommendations that could help reduce these effects. We thereby implore the government and stakeholders if they could lower the tax on vehicular spare parts, and if possible subsidize the cost of fuel. This could help the transport operators, and also during such emergencies of this kind of magnitude, it could also improve the likelihood and the livelihood of the commuters as well. And for getting a sustainable transport system during such emergencies, our transport facility network system could be improved by designing and constructing cycling lanes and walking facilities for the pedestrians. Because from our survey, we found out that most of the respondents during the pandemic, they preferred walking other than using public transport due to the fear of contacting this disease. So they preferred walking. So these facilities, if they will be put in place and make the network system more friendly for the pedestrians and the cyclists. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Fidelma. That was really, really interesting. And it was great to see, first of all, thank you very much for being on time and for presenting the key findings of your work. It's great to see that the focus was mostly on the perceptions of commercial drivers, because over the last couple of years, we have seen that the focus is mostly on passengers, on commuters. We haven't seen so much the perspective of commercial drivers, and this is very, very important. I'm keeping the recommendation for expanding the facilities and perhaps improving the facilities for cycling lanes and other walking facilities. This is something that we can perhaps discuss in the Q&A session in the end. Thank you very much again, Fidelma, for your presentation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think everybody will join me in thanking you for this. We will be moving forward again with the third session. I'm happy that we are on time, so that means that we'll have substantial time in the end for an open floor discussion. So the third presentation is from Mostafa Ayman Ilham from Edinburgh Napier University. Again, I am familiar with Ayman. We're working together. So Ayman is a PhD research student in the School of Engineering and Built Environment in the Transport Research Institute, actually. The topic of his study is the long-term impact of COVID-19 on transport and housing infrastructure. Ayman holds an MSc in Transport Planning and Engineering. He is proficient and has an in-depth knowledge in the field of transport and urban planning. He has written a dissertation on the impact of social distancing and delays to buses in the Greater Manchester area. And for this presentation today, he collaborated with Toran Semple, who is also a co-author of this work. So the topic of Ayman's presentation is an empirical analysis of the factors influencing Scottish residents' compliance with COVID-19 travel restriction. Ayman, we can see your screen right now. We can see your PowerPoint presentation. So thank you very much for joining today, and the floor is yours. Just to remind you, you have 12 minutes approximately for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Greg. So let's get started. So today I will be talking to you about the compliance to COVID-19 restrictions among Scottish residents. So this study was motivated by the variations of restrictions over time following the easing of the first lockdown rules after June 2020, as businesses were kept running as long as possible until another major lockdown started in 2021 after Christmas. This led to conflicting messages between the devolved governments and the central government. So England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland each had their own separate policies on like how to control the virus. And because of this difference in opinion, as well as great differences of opinion between different media sources. Consequently, this has compromised public trust in policy measures and thus their compliance to the guidelines. As compliance to government guidelines is very important in helping choose the right policies to control the spread of the virus, the aim of this study is to investigate the different factors that affect the compliance. So a survey has been conducted by the university in February 2021 while the country was in lockdown, retrieving information about the compliance levels of 994 Scottish residents. The key question responses are recorded on a scale of 1 non-compliant to 7 fully compliant, with numbers in between indicating intermediary levels of compliance. In addition to this, various details are recorded to determine possible explanatory variables that affect the compliance. So according to this chart, the 7 levels have been grouped into 3, with the lowest 4 being in level 1, low compliant, and then levels 5 and 6 being in level 2, mostly compliant, and finally level 7 being level 3, fully compliant. Only 819 of the 994 samples were used, as incomplete responses have been omitted to ensure consistent results. As can be seen, the majority of the residents are either fully compliant, 57%, or mostly compliant, 35%, leaving only 8% of residents showing lower levels of compliance, with just a quarter of this span being non-compliant. So due to the discrete ordinal nature of the dependent variable, ordered probit modeling was used for the statistical analysis, extended to include random parameters, thus allowing the potential for unobserved heterogeneity. This means that the result of a particular variable can differ greatly based on the circumstance of each individual. So from the results, those aged over 65 are more likely to be compliant than other age groups, while it is shown that those aged between 18 and 24 are the least likely to be compliant. This reflects the difference in how older and younger groups perceive the virus. As expected, public trust in the Scottish government is strongly correlated with compliance. On the other hand, those shown to be less likely to comply with the regulations include males compared to females due to their increased because they tend to underestimate the the perceptions of the and consequences of the virus compared to females, and also those with annual household incomes exceeding £50,000 compared to those who make lower. So the latter initially appears to be counterintuitive, as higher income households are expected to have better access to facilities that would aid reducing trip frequency and distance, such as remote working and larger dwellings which accommodate more activities at home, as well as there's a positive correlation between higher incomes and education levels indicated by other studies, potentially leading to more accurate knowledge of COVID-19. However, higher income households also have a greater freedom of movement as a result of car ownership and fuel affordability. So this is likely a big factor contributing to the result obtained in the study. Also, the financial incentive to comply with restrictions, especially fines for violating restrictions, may be less effective among those of higher incomes. As for variables, those variables shown to be significant random parameters, they will be covered in the next slide. So with regards to households that do not own a car, the results showed almost a 50-50 divide between being more likely to be compliant and being less likely to be compliant compared to those who do own a car. So while people who do not own a car have restricted freedom of movement compared to those that do, at the same time, they have a harder time avoiding public transport for those that still have to travel more frequently or travel longer distances, thus leading to this heterogeneity. With regards to the source of COVID-19 information, those who take it from online sources are generally more likely to be compliant. However, the reason it remains a random variable is due to the deregulated nature of the internet, especially with the social media outlets, compared to more regulated sources like TV, radio, newspapers, leading to a much greater difference of opinion regarding COVID-19, and thus a significant proportion of internet users become less likely to be compliant as a consequence. So to summarize the key findings of the study, compliance levels are generally very high among Scottish residents. As for the groups that tend to be less compliant, this is shown to be among males, high-income households, and those aged 18 to 24. While all media sources for COVID information generally lead to higher levels of compliance, internet has a more random effect, with a significant number of users becoming less compliant as a consequence compared to those who take from more regulated media like TV, radio, and newspapers. This is due to the much greater difference of opinion online compared to on TV or radio. So in order to maintain the high levels of compliance, we suggest that the Scottish Government continues to disseminate COVID-19 information through a variety of information channels, particularly online or through television and radio. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very, very much, Ayman, for this presentation. In fact, you introduced an issue about the information sources and the trust to some online sources, which is something that, of course, requires further investigation, not only from us in this session or in this panel, but also in future research, because we have seen that a lot of information which is disseminated through online sources sometimes perhaps may give the wrong message because it is not based on proper scientific evidence. Never mind, thank you very much, Ayman. We will be in touch in a few minutes in the Q&A session. So now I think, thank you. I think I can move forward with the last but not least presentation of the today's session. The presenter is Suzanne Kelly. Suzanne is here. So Suzanne is Suzanne or Susan?
Suzanne.
Suzanne, excellent, thank you. Yeah. Holds an MSc degree in health safety and human factor, a bachelor degree in athletic therapy and training and biomedical science. She recently joined the Health and Safety Authority as an inspector. She has been working in occupational health and safety for a number of large multinational organizations since 2012. Suzanne is a member of the Ireland's Health and Safety Authority. So the topic of Suzanne's presentation is the health impact of remote work during the COVID-19 pandemic, a snapshot on commuting and other aspects from a holistic approach. It's very important to see also not the public health impact of COVID-19 as a pandemic, but also the public health impact of the restrictions that have been taken in order to combat the health impact of the pandemic. And I think your presentation, Suzanne, today is very relevant to this direction. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Fantastic. So thanks for inviting me here today, everybody, to discuss my master's research, which was on the health impact of remote work during the COVID-19 pandemic. So just to briefly introduce what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, I'll introduce the research question and briefly discuss the methodology that was used. I'm going to talk about some of the results, trying to focus in on the ones that are most relevant to this symposium, and then just briefly call out some of the limitations to the research design that I identified. So the research question that I chose to address was whether or not remote work had an impact on the holistic measures of worker health. And obviously this was set against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, where there were widespread emergency restrictions introduced by the government to reduce the spread of COVID-19. And one of those that was introduced widely was remote work where possible. And, you know, I think I noticed looking at most of our webcams today, we're still working remotely. So it's still something that's very much relevant today. And one of the things that we wanted to look at was to measure health as holistically as possible. So looking at mental, physical and social health parameters. So 9 different parameters were chosen to be looked at in this study. Looking at stress, physical activity levels, mental workload, job satisfaction, overall satisfaction, pain, and then ergonomics. So just to briefly talk about the methodology that was used, it was a mixed methods research design. A Google form was developed, an online form, that had about 43 questions over them.
Suzanne,
Yeah, sorry.
Can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
We cannot see you on the camera. Is this intentional or
no,
because
I'm not sure. It actually says that I'm sharing my webcam, so I'm not sure why that's not working.
Just to let you know, but we cannot see you in any case. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, I can stop looking at that webcam then if it's not working.
No worries.
Has that got any better, Greg? I've just reconnected it.
No, it's the same thing.
No, okay, great. Well, I don't need to look at that webcam anymore, but thanks for that.
No worries.
So yeah, a Google form was developed using 9 different areas, or looking at 9 different parameters that had approximately 43 questions, and 2 of them related specifically to transport. So one looked at how long it had previously taken the respondents to travel to work, and the second one asked what method of transport was used. Now, following completion of that online form, a remote workstation assessment was applied using a tool called the Rapid Upper Limb Assessment Tool, where participants were asked to send through photographs of them at their home workstation, and that ruler tool was applied. So that's how that data was collected. Just looking at that online form, as I said, there were 9 sections, and each of these tools had previously been validated and used in studies, but to my knowledge, they hadn't actually been combined to give that holistic view of health. 103 responses were collected over a 4-month period, from March to June 2021 for that online form. And then the second phase was the remote workstation evaluation. So 8 participants provided photographs of themselves working at their home workstation, and then this ruler tool was applied using them photographs. So the assessment was completely remote, was completely online, and involved no face-to-face interactions. So just going to discuss the results then. There were a lot of significant results found. I'm not going to discuss them all today just for time pressure, but I suppose to touch on the ones that are most relevant to this symposium. Some differences in gender were identified. Males were more likely to report increased levels of activity and increased overall satisfaction than females, and females were more likely to report increased stress levels. Looking at family type, there were some differences identified. Families that had special needs members were much more likely to report higher stress and higher raw TLX or mental workload scores than those that didn't have special needs members. Also, families that had multi-generational individuals, so if we had grandparents living in the same household, they were likely to report the highest levels of overall satisfaction with their work from home situation. If we're looking at remote work duration, there was a correlation between longer periods of remote work and decreased levels of activity, increased levels of pain, and increased mental workload scores. If we were to look at location then, respondents who lived in a rural location reported higher overall satisfaction when compared with our urban and suburban dwellers. And those who lived in urban locations also reported the highest sedentary hours. And finally, just to call out the historical commute findings, those that had a historical commute of over 90 minutes reported the highest overall satisfaction, the highest number of activity minutes, and the lowest stress levels of all respondents. So I'm going to just focus in on that historical commute time variable in a little bit more detail. If we're looking at that total sample, the historical commute time was 47 minutes on average, with a standard deviation of about 35.7. And in order to do a little bit more detailed analysis on the effect of the commute times, the participants were split into 4 groups. You can see there group 1 had a commute time of 30 minutes or less, and then a group 4 had a commute time of 90 minutes or more. And some significant results were then found from splitting the commuters into these different groups. So I'll just look at perceived stress and overall satisfaction then in a little bit more detail. So the perceived stress, there were significant differences found between groups 1 and 2 and groups 1 and 4. And if we're looking at the overall satisfaction, significant differences were identified between groups 1 and 2 and 4. So if we're looking at that group 4, the individuals who had the longest historical commute time, they're now reporting the least stress and the highest satisfaction levels with their remote work situation. Just going to look in a little bit more detail then at the method of commute to work. You can see that, over half of the respondents travelled previously to work via caravan or minibus. And looking then at active commuters, so those who walked or cycled to work previously, we had approximately 11% or 13 individuals who used that bicycle or walk to work previously. And interestingly, these previously active commuter group, they actually reported activity levels about 800 minutes per week on average less than the rest of the population. So what we found was a tendency towards reduced exercise in those who'd previously used them active commuting methods compared with those who used them passive commuting methods before. So just to summarise the key findings related to transport, not having to commute to work was mentioned by 41% of respondents as a positive benefit of remote work. So it was the second most common benefit noted in the study. There was a high variance in that commute time from between 5 minutes and 4 hours. As I've already mentioned, that historical commute of longer than 90 minutes was associated with higher activity, higher overall satisfaction and lower stress levels. And a previously active commuter group reported less exercise, significantly less exercise than the passive commuter groups. I'm just going to call out a few limitations that were identified. As a lot of self-reported measures were used, the data may have been affected by recall bias. There was quite a small sample size, 103 participants who were predominantly female, and over 50% of the respondents were Irish. Although every effort was made to look at health holistically, the impact of some behaviours, such as taking rest breaks, having a good or poor diet, and maybe any overtime hours, things like that, were not considered. And obviously, as the research was conducted during the pandemic, its applicability to non-pandemic times would be quite limited. So that's just a brief snapshot of my master's research. I really thank you for your attention and for inviting me to chat here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Suzanne. Very, very intriguing presentation. Very nice findings, especially it's good to see all the different metrics of physical activity, well-being, and overall health outcomes in the same approach. That is very interesting. So now I think it's the time. We are over with our 4 presentations with the very interesting and very timely presentations. So now I would like to invite all the presenters to turn on the cameras and join the session. I'm planning to have an open floor discussion. So in the meanwhile, I will be waiting for specific questions from the audience to come to me. But before going to that level, first of all, I would like to thank you everybody for focusing on different aspects or in different dimensions of the impact of COVID-19 on mobility. And it was great to see different case studies across the globe, in Sierra Leone, in the UK, in Ireland. In fact, the work of Suzanne also had information from Australia and United Kingdom too. So Suzanne, just for your information, your camera is still green. No worries about that.
Very patriotic.
Yeah, no worries, no worries. So I have a question, first of all, because I think I have to be honest, I'm a bit subjective for this question, because this comes from my research background as a researcher in statistical analysis of this kind of data. So something that I noticed across all the studies, which was really interesting, is that the data were collected at different stages of the pandemic. For example, in Fidelma's work, the data were collected in May, June 2020, in the first outbreak wave of the pandemic. In Ajay's work, data collected in February 2021. In Ayman's work, data were collected across different survey waves from the onset of the pandemic until September 2020. So I was wondering, and from a practical and statistical point of view, if you believe that the findings that you have already observed in the studies, using the data within perhaps the most serious outbreak of the pandemic, can be replicable or transferable in the future. In other words, changes that you have identified will become permanent, or when the situation will further improve from the point that we are right now, will revert back to the pre-pandemic situation. I would like to hear a quick comment from everybody on this. I would start with the order of your presentation. So we can start first with Ajay, we can continue with Fidelma, and then Ayman and Suzanne.
I think because even when the pandemic is over or things are getting back to normal, the extent of remote working is not going away. So like specific to my findings, where relocation was more or less driven by by the fact that whether you have a remote working option available or not, I think those the trends found will continue.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ajay. So do you believe that because of the stability of the teleworking patterns, also the impact of this will particularly get more permanent, especially in commuting trips, right? Okay, we can continue with Fidelma. Can you hear us? Yeah.
Okay. Please, can you come again with the question? My network went off. So sorry.
No worries, no worries. So I was wondering if you believe that the findings of your work, which are based on data that you collected in May, June 2020, where we had the most serious outbreak of the pandemic, the most serious impact of the pandemic, if you believe that the same findings, the same trends will be stabilized after the end of the pandemic, or we will revert perhaps to a pre-pandemic situation as we were before COVID-19?
I believe the pandemic affected some major activities. So going back to normal, I don't see it forthcoming. So there will still be a shift in normal and after the pandemic. So we won't go totally to how it was before.
Okay, so your opinion is quite similar to Ajay's, that some of these changes will become quite permanent. Yep. Okay, thank you. We can continue with Ayman then.
Okay, so because a lot of new habits that arise as a result of the pandemic, people are like habituated with now, like stuff like working from home and also modal shift, and more people not using public transport. That's kind of causing a more permanent effect on public transport, because public transport much harder to recover after lower ridership, and therefore a lot of these will start to continue in the long term, even like after the pandemic is like reduced. Yeah, because people and also more places are adapted to like teleworking. It's a lot more convenient for most people, and as people have even relocated because they don't have to go to the office as often, it's likely that this will continue even further.
Excellent. So the consensus so far is teleworking is here to come, is here to remain, and this will have an impact in all of our commuting patterns. Okay. However, going now to Suzanne, which is great, we can see you. Thank you again. To be honest, Suzanne, I would personally like for your findings to remain also after the pandemic, especially the findings with regard to satisfaction and physical activity levels. I mean, the increase of the physical activity levels. But what do you think?
Yeah, like I'd have to agree with the other panelists there. I think a lot of the behaviours will remain, because they have, you know, I suppose we've become so used to remote work. I don't think we'll ever go back to how we were pre-pandemic. But I suppose some of the findings certainly around the impact of remote work on social health, which I know I didn't really speak to much in this presentation, a lot of them were negative, you know, feelings around isolation from prolonged remote work, that hopefully when we, you know, get to our new normal, we'll be able to combine, you know, a hybrid remote and in-person work environment so that we can get the benefits of both, because there are a lot of social benefits from, you know, physically being in a workplace that it's very hard to replicate in that home environment.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And to be honest, now if I may and go to some specific questions for each presentation, and starting from you, Suzanne, again, you mentioned that as a limitation, the fact that you have a small sample size and perhaps different subgroups from different countries. However, okay, I understand that the vast majority of the respondents were from Ireland. But you had also some respondents from Australia, a small amount of respondents, and also from the UK. Despite, if we, let's say, forget the fact that the number of respondents from these two countries is low in your overall sample size, do you believe that the different levels of restriction that were imposed during different phases of the pandemic could have an indirect, at least, impact on all these health outcomes? For example, Australia had a totally different approach, more, let's say, a bit more stringent approach compared to the UK or Ireland. So do you believe that the different level or the varying level of restrictions can have an impact on these health outcomes that you studied?
Oh, for sure, definitely. And interestingly, during my data collection period was actually a time when Australia was in very little restrictions. So I completed mine between March and June 2021. So you could really see a stark difference in, you know, especially that job satisfaction, performance and isolation, and the activity levels between Ireland and the UK, which were quite heavily in restrictions at the time, and Australia, which was, you know, apart from, you know, a restriction in international travel, seemed to be, you know, pretty much normal in terms of the COVID response. So certainly, I think if I had higher numbers, I think potentially 8 people from Australia responded. So just the data wasn't powerful enough to be able to really pull any meaningful statistics from that. But I'd say, you know, if I had a much larger sample size, you would have really been able to see the impact of the different restrictions in the different governments of the different countries, and the impact that it had on the health of the remote workers.
Excellent, exactly. Thank you very much. I have also a quick question about the study of Fidelma, which was very, very interesting. I saw that you did a phone interview, right, in order to collect the data. So you did a kind of phone survey for the commercial drivers. And given that the focus of this session is on equity and gender and overall diversity issues in transport, I was wondering how what kind of recruitment approach did you follow for the phone interview? First of all, I have to say that phone interviews and online surveys were the only applicable and appropriate survey methods during the pandemic. So I'm pretty sure that there will be some challenges with regard to recruiting a sample that could be representative, at least, of the overall population or the target populations of commercial drivers in terms of gender. So how did you recruit, let's say, a sample for the data that you use for the analysis?
Oh, okay. So we were able to visit the terminals, and that was the 21 terminals. So getting there, we gathered information from the drivers, their driver heads, and then the commuters, the passengers at those terminals. And then we also did some kind of a random sampling of commuters along those terminals. So that was how we were able to get such information and get our respondents.
Okay, okay. That's good. So you had, let's say, more holistic approach in terms of data collection, which is good for the quality of the data probably that you used. And I have a last question for Ajay about the intentions from future relocation. Given that we are talking about intentions,
yeah,
do you believe, for example, that if you replicate exactly the same survey now, or not now, in February 2022, which is 1 year after February 2021, would you have similar data? I'm saying that because just before I start the session today, I saw in the local media here, in the BBC News, that right now we are in the year where in the UK, the housing prices are the highest over the last decade. So do you believe that the data that you would collect if you do the survey again in a couple of months' time will be similar to what you have seen in the previous survey?
I believe that the intention to relocate, like we would see a higher percentage of people who would be willing to relocate if the survey is done again, let's say in February, because like relocation is a big thing, which it's not a small decision. And when the survey was done in last February, the outlook was quite negative too. Like many things were unknown. The vaccine rollout wasn't like the success of it was not known and things like those. So we know a lot more about the threat from the virus, but we have also seen and experienced the benefits or the convenience of remote working, which probably is driving the relocations. So I think there would be a bigger percentage of people who would be willing to change their residence and go to a place where they find it better from their current place.
Okay, makes sense. Exactly. Thank you very, very much. I think we had a quite interesting discussion. I don't know if the panelists have any other question or any other comment that they want to add. Otherwise, if not, we can end a bit earlier so everybody can enjoy a bit extended lunchtime until the next session, actually until the keynote of Professor Chandrabhat, which will be extremely interesting. So thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for joining this session. Thank you for contributing to this session with your excellent and very exciting presentations. I'm pretty sure that everybody will join me in thanking you. Thank you very much, even in a virtual world, and hope the best for the day, for the symposium, and for the next steps of your career, of course. Thank you.